This is an interesting one. Starmer reiterates Corbyn's days as a Labour MP are over following his refusal to call Hamas terrorists. We're going to read into this more from The Independent, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an article from The Independent with the headline that Starmer has reiterated Corbyn's days as Labour MP are over following his refusal to call Hamas terrorists. The Labour leader is shocked by left-wingers' refusal to call Hamas terrorists in a Piers Morgan interview. So, for those who don't know, Piers Morgan had Jeremy Corbyn and on an interview, and he was asked at least 14 times to condemn Hamas and call them basically terrorists, and Jeremy Corbyn refused at all times to do so. Now, Jeremy Corbyn is a man of principle, and he stands by his principles. And there were things when he was Labour leader that, in my opinion, he could have done a lot better. I had no issue with Jeremy Corbyn's policies. I actually thought they were good policies. But when it came to dealing with certain issues, in particular the anti-Semitism within the party, his refusal to deal with that and acknowledge that was one of the things that made me not vote for Labour in the 2019 general election. I voted Green. For me, it was like I knew the papers were BSing the public about Corbyn and all this, but the establishment, the so-called establishment, knew that Jeremy Corbyn was a threat, which is why the papers went out of their way to destroy him so much, and they used the whole anti-Semitism as a weapon against him as well. But sometimes you have to change course for the benefit of the party. And I just felt at that time, his refusal to not deal with the anti-Semitism in Labour was wrong in my opinion. You can disagree with me, but I felt it was wrong for him not to challenge it and take it on, and he never did for me. And seeing where he is now and where Keir Starmer is now, it does sting a little bit, because he did come across to me as somebody. He didn't come across to me so much as a leader, but I found him as a useful politician, and it's a shame that he's been ousted pretty much. And this refusal to call Hamas terrorists. Now, the question is what do you define the word terrorist? How do you define that word? And what is the definition of what you would call a terrorist? And I think that's the question that we should be saying to ourselves. How do you define that word terrorist? What's the definition of it? Because lots of people have been branded, lots of criminals and murderers or all sorts of crimes in that. People have been dubbed as terrorists, been given that word. Is Hamas terrorists? I would say yes. But is Hamas, was this created out of thin air? No. This was made by given the history, Hamas and their hatred for Israel was born out of what they've been going through for the several decades under the oppression of Israel. So yes, they are terrorists, but they're terrorists that have been made into terrorists by the hands of Israel and the occupation that they've been under for the last several decades. What they did on October the 7th was absolutely horrific and disgusting, to say the least, but that doesn't take away the damage and the cause and the pain and the suffering that Israel have caused to Palestine, to Gaza, to those people. And nobody should be dismissing that in any way, shape or form. Blood has been spilled on both sides, and Hamas are terrorists. And I guess the question is, okay, so if you believe Hamas are terrorists, why do you think Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't call them terrorists? Well, my honest answer is the reason why I don't think he would call them terrorists is because he believes that you will not get rid of Hamas, that Israel will not be able to destroy Hamas, and that the only way this bloodshed is going to end is with negotiation. So essentially what he's saying is that what Hamas did on October the 7th was absolutely atrocious and despicable and should be condemned by everybody, and he has condemned it. But at the same time, we have to, Israel has to sit round the table with them, with the same people that butchered and took away innocent lives and children, and expect them to negotiate. And just ask yourself that. And that's why you like call them terrorists, because he believes that, and there's no point calling them terrorists when in the end you're going to end up working alongside them. Wasn't the Taliban once called terrorists? And now they essentially run Afghanistan. Weren't the Taliban once dubbed terrorists as well? Do we still call them terrorists? Let me know in the comments section down below if we still call them terrorists. So, on that, it's a fine, difficult line to say the least. And my position is that I want the bloodshed to stop. Now, if I was a politician, if I was in Corbyn's shoes, if I wasn't just a YouTuber giving my opinion, if I was under that pressure as a politician to be put on the spot, I probably would do the same thing as Corbyn, simply because I know that eventually you're going to have to talk to these terrorists. What they did was unforgiving. But are they going to be able to wipe them out? I don't think so. Part of me feels that they're not going to be able to. And eventually you're going to end up having to negotiate with them. Because Hamas was created by Israel, by what they've done to the Palestinian people, to Gaza, to the people in Gaza, based on the history. But then I would be slandered as Corbyn would be here. So essentially, whatever I do, and if I condemn them, Hamas will say, "Well, you called us terrorists. Why should? Because of what we did." Does that really matter if they're called terrorists or not? Being labelled as a terrorist, does it matter if they're labelled a terrorist or not? Still, what they did was atrocious. Does it really matter? Maybe I'm thinking of it the wrong way. Maybe I should be thinking of it as, it doesn't matter what they're labelled. What they did was atrocious, disgusting and horrible, and they should pay for that. But at the same time, where is the outrage and anger over what Israel have done? Israel government specifically, not its people. And I think that's a question that needs to be asked too. But on Starmer here, saying that Corbyn's days as Labour MP are over, is Corbyn's days as an MP going to end? That's a question. And only the constituency of Islington North will be the ones to answer that. So Keir Starmer said Jeremy Corbyn's days as a Labour MP are over, as he condemned the former leader's repeated refusal to call Hamas a terrorist organisation in an interview. The Labour leader said his predecessor, stripped of the party whip in 2020, won't stand as a Labour MP at the next election or any election. Mr Corbyn had been repeatedly asked on TalkTV's Piers Uncensored programme this week if he thought Hamas was a terror group. But the independent Islington North MP, an outspoken critic of Israel, continually avoided the question and attempted to move the conversation on. Mr Corbyn was later told on Times Radio, of course it was a terror attack and it was an awful attack. So Keir, who served as Mr Corbyn's shadow cabinet, said he was taken aback and shook by the left-wing Stewart refusal to describe Hamas as a terror outfit in the TalkTV interview. It reaffirmed to me why it's so important to me and to this changed Labour Party that Jeremy Corbyn does not sit as a Labour MP and will not be a candidate at the next election for the Labour Party, he continued. That's how far we've changed as the Labour Party. When asked whether Mr Corbyn's interview with Morgan would preclude him from standing for Labour again, Sir Keir said he won't stand as a Labour MP at the next election or any election. His days as Labour MP are over. We have a changed party. Hamas were responsible for the 7th October assault on Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking more than 240 other hostages in a raid that sparked a bloody war in the Middle East. The Gaza rulers are prescribed as a terror group in the UK and support for them is banned. Mr Corbyn had the Labour whip in Parliament removed in October 2020 over his response to the Equalities Watchdog report on anti-Semitism in his party during his tenure as leader. He sits as an independent MP but remains a Labour member. Sir Keir faced a bruising week in the issue of the Israel-Hamas war, suffering a major rebellion in the Commons against his party's position of refusal to back a ceasefire. The Labour leader, who has backed Rishi Sunak's call for a humanitarian pause, had put his MPs on a three-line whip not to vote for an SNP motion calling for immediate ceasefire. But 56 of his lawmakers defied the order, with 10 shadow ministers and parliamentary aides among them. Front benchers, including Jess Phillips, quit or were sacked as a result. Sir Keir insisted there is no unconditional support for Israel as it fights back against Hamas, and urged that civilians and hospitals must be protected and international law upheld. Labour rebels who quit, I wouldn't call them rebels, I wouldn't go that far. Those in Labour who quit or sacked over it could still join Sir Keir's top team after the election, as Shadow Defence Secretary John Henley said. Asked whether rebellion would rule them out of a ministerial post in a Labour government, Mr Healy said, "For that well down the track, before we insist there was a deeper unity in the Labour Party." Other former shadow ministers now on the backbenches, including Yasmin Kweli, Asif Khan, Paula Baker, Rachel Hopkins, Sarah Onin, Naz Shag and Andy Slaughter. Parliamentarians Private Secretary Andy Cardin and Mary Foy, who had been working with the Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, joined them in stepping down. It comes as Palestine protest organisers prepare for a national day of action on Saturday instead of a large march in central London. The direct action will take form of more than 100 smaller rallies at various locations across the UK. Previous weekends have seen thousands of protesters and counter-protesters convening on the capital. A spokeswoman for the organisers Stop the War coalition said that Saturday's rallies come ahead of a national demonstration planned for the following Saturday. So they're planning another big one. So today I'm recording this is on Saturday. They're doing a massive rally, big one next week, and they're just doing smaller ones all over the UK today. So what are my thoughts first of all on the Labour rebels who quit before? What are my thoughts on the Labour rebels? I think so-called Labour rebels, I wouldn't call them rebels. I think they're voting with their conscience, and they're voting on what their constituencies are saying to them. So it's not so much against the Labour leader. Like they don't hate the Labour leader. They don't think he's a bad leader or anything like that. Some of them do feel that he's wrong to not call for a ceasefire. He's in an impossible position when it comes to that, and I do believe that most of those who did either step down or step away or whatnot are doing it on their conscience and for their constituencies. And I think that will help them when it comes to the general election, when it comes to them fighting for their position. Those who voted with Keir Starmer, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them, because there will be some people who still want the Conservatives gone, but some will be saying with their conscience that you don't believe in a ceasefire, you're not standing for a ceasefire, you're not calling for a ceasefire, and that will hit the Labour MPs who chose to toe the line, shall we say. So whatever they were going to do, it was always going to be a tough spot for them. But in terms of Jeremy Corbyn, I don't see him coming back into Labour now at this point. I think deep down he knows that. I think some of his supporters know that. Keir Starmer is likely going to be the next Prime Minister, and he's going to have a lot of power. Should he start his own party? I think is a question we need to ask. Should he start his own left-wing party? I suppose if proportional representation does come in down the road, gives him the incentive to do so. You know, the Labour Party will then can split, can't it? Because then you can create factions there. So perhaps then there may be an opportunity for for Jeremy Corbyn to form his own party and install his beliefs in that party, perhaps. But we'll have to wait and see. But it's difficult to say the least, guys. But a part of me still thinks that Jeremy Corbyn is still somehow going to be able to. He's going to be pushing hard for his constituents in Islington North. I somehow don't think he's going to lose his seat, but maybe I'm going to be wrong. What do you guys think? Do you think Keir Starmer's right to keep Jeremy Corbyn out? Do you think Jeremy Corbyn was wrong to not condemn Hamas as terrorists? Let me know what you honestly think in the comment section down below, and what you thought of my thoughts on it as well. Curious to hear what you guys think. Hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share across social media. Hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I upload another video. And if you want to financially support me, you can do so by buying me a coffee in the link down below. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.